Old Hollywood sold perfect kisses and guarded truths. Behind studio beards, staged romances, and ironclad contracts were real men navigating fame, fear, and desire. This film isn't about gotcha reveals, it's about context and compassion. From Rock Hudson to Salmoneo, we revisit careers you know and hearts you never met, showing how a system rewarded fantasy and punished honesty. Lean in. The spotlight finally belongs to their truth. 1. Rock Hudson. The heartthrob. They gave a lie. He was the man every woman dreamed of. Square jaw, soft eyes, a smile made for Technicolor. Rock Hudson wasn't just a heartthrob. He was the blueprint. The leading man in epic romances, the war hero, the perfect husband. But every kiss on screen came with a contract off screen. Deny, deflect, disappear. Behind the studio-arranged dates and gossip column beards, Rock was living a carefully stage-managed lie. He had lovers, men who were kept out of frame, out of reach, out of history. Everyone in the industry knew. The tabloids whispered. But the fans? They adored the fantasy too much to look closer. He was outed not by choice, but by illness. In 1985, when AIDS took hold of his body, Hollywood had to face the truth it had long buried. Their golden boy was gay and dying. His coming out, forced by circumstance, became a cultural earthquake. The world grieved not just for a man, but for the mask he had to wear until the end. He was the leading man in love stories, but he never got to live one. Subscribe to help rewrite the script that denied him his truth. 2. Montgomery Clift, the broken beauty. He was beauty undone. Montgomery Clift didn't act, he ached. Every role, every glance, every silence on screen held a weight too real to fake. He was the anti-leading man, fragile, introspective, electric. And behind that magnetic vulnerability was a truth he could never fully speak. Monty was gay. That much his closest circle knew. Lovers came and went, writers, actors, a certain quiet sadness. But MGM didn't want gay. They wanted grit and glamour. So Monty gave them performances soaked in pain. And off-screen, he unraveled. After a car crash in 1956 shattered his face, he fell into a spiral of addiction, self-loathing, and secret-keeping. He became a shadow of the star he once was, Hollywood's most beautiful tragedy. The press called it a fall from grace. But it wasn't grace he lost. It was the safety to be fully seen. His legacy lives in every actor who dares to feel too much. Subscribe if you believe beauty should never have to hide in pain. 3. Anthony Perkins, the psycho who couldn't scream his truth to the world. He was Norman Bates, the boyish killer with mother issues. But Anthony Perkins played more than one role in real life. He was the leading man afraid of being found out, the romantic who lived in fear of love's consequences, the queer icon who never got to wear the crown. His relationship with fellow actor Tab Hunter was passionate, complicated, and hidden. Studio executives warned him, one photo, one rumor, and it's all over. So he married a woman, had children, and let Hollywood believe what it wanted to. But silence has a cost. Anthony battled internal torment, therapy, religion, denial. In 1992, he died of AIDS-related complications, still never publicly out. He once said, "I have learned more about love in the closet than I ever did in the open." That's not wisdom. That's a wound. His most famous role was a man hiding a secret. So was his life. Subscribe if you believe no one should die edited. 4. Tab Hunter on the dreamboat drowning in secrets. He was the sun-kissed fantasy of 1950s America, blonde, blue-eyed, built like a lifeguard from heaven. Tab Hunter had it all, except freedom. As his fame skyrocketed, so did the studio's efforts to protect their investment. Fake dates, gossip spin, strict instructions, never be seen holding hands with a man. But behind closed doors, Tab was deeply in love with Anthony Perkins, with horses, with silence. He wasn't hiding from the world. He was surviving it. It wasn't until 2005, long after Hollywood had forgotten him, that Tab finally told his truth. In Tab Hunter Confidential, he laid it bare. The fear, the secrecy, the heartbreak of being beautiful in a world that only accepted straight. He didn't come out in protest. He came out in peace. Because truth doesn't age, even when beauty fades. He was the all-American boy, but his real story was never on the screen. Subscribe if you believe legends deserve to speak in their own voice. 5. Richard Chamberlain, the prince who hid his heart. He was television royalty. Dr. Kildare, the tormented priest in The Thornbirds, the romantic lead women swooned over for decades. Richard Chamberlain was elegance personified. But behind the aristocratic cheekbones and patient eyes was a man taught to fear his own reflection. He knew he was gay early. So did Hollywood. But silence was the deal. If he wanted the big roles, the magazine covers, the fan hysteria, his truth had to stay backstage. For decades, Richard performed a version of himself that the world could adore and the studios could control. He had a long-term male partner, but their love lived behind gated doors. Interviews? Scripted? Smiles? Practiced. The cost? Immeasurable. It wasn't until 2003, after retirement, after the spotlight dimmed, that he came out in his memoir. Not as a statement, as a confession whispered too late. He healed hearts on screen while breaking his own in silence. Subscribe if you believe no actor should be ashamed of love. 6. George Nader, the leading man who took the fall. He was handsome, talented, on the verge of superstardom. George Nader had what it took to be the next Rock Hudson, and that was the problem. Because behind the curtain, George was in a long-term relationship with Hudson's real-life lover, Mark Miller. And someone wanted that truth buried. In the 60s, a tabloid got hold of compromising photos. The studio needed to protect their bankable star. The choice was cruelly simple. Throw Nader to the wolves. He was blacklisted, quietly erased, sacrificed to save another man's career. George didn't fight back. He disappeared with dignity, moved to Europe, and built a quiet life with Miller. They stayed together for over 50 years. He wrote science fiction. He walked the beach. He lived in the shadows with the kind of quiet defiance only true love can sustain. He lost Hollywood, but kept his soul. Subscribe if you believe no love story should come with a gag order. 7. Paul Winfield, a love that hid in award season shadows. With a voice like velvet thunder and eyes that could melt glass, Paul Winfield should have been everywhere. And for a while, he was. Sounder earned him an Oscar nod. The Terminator, Star Trek, Roots, he was there, always elevating the frame. But behind the elegance was a secret wrapped in grace and silence. Paul lived with his partner, Charles Gillen Jr. for Cuser for over 30 years. No red carpets, no interviews, no declarations. Just quiet, steadfast love in a world that wasn't ready to see it. Being black and brilliant was already an act of rebellion. Being gay too? Career suicide. So Paul played the game with poise while hiding his heart. It wasn't until after his death in 2004 that the truth was fully acknowledged. He had already done the hard part, living honestly in the shadows. He deserved more than awards. He deserved to be seen. Subscribe if you believe success shouldn't demand secrecy. 8. Robert Reed, the perfect dad with a hidden life. He was America's favorite father, Mike Brady on the Brady Bunch, the image of moral clarity and suburban comfort. But Robert Reed's real life was a quiet contradiction. While he played the ultimate family man on screen, he kept a deep truth locked away off-screen. Robert was gay, but no one said it out loud. Not on set, not in interviews, not even among most friends. He lived in fear of tabloid exposure, of disappointing fans, of losing everything he had built. He died in 1992 of AIDS-related complications. Only then did his truth start to surface. Co-stars were shocked, some heartbroken, others not surprised. The tragedy wasn't that he was gay. The tragedy was that even as a man who brought families together on screen, he never got to have his own, at least not in the open. He taught the world about love, but never got to show his. Subscribe if you believe no one should have to act through their entire life. 9. Victor Buono, the giant who lived small. He made you laugh. He made you squirm. Victor Buono was unforgettable, larger than life in size, voice, and presence. He played villains with such delicious menace that audiences never stopped to wonder, who was he really? Victor never married, never brought a +1. When asked about love, he'd flash a knowing smile and say he hadn't found the right woman. It was a line rehearsed for survival. Behind the curtains, he was a lonely soul, a gentle man with a quick wit and a heavy heart. The industry saw him as a character actor, but never the leading man. Too big, too flamboyant, too gay. He lived alone, died alone, and left behind a career that sparkled, but a life shrouded in omission. Hollywood gave him applause, but never acceptance. He played monsters for the camera, but in real life, he just wanted to be loved. Subscribe if you believe nobody should have to joke their way out of loneliness. 10. Jim Nabors, the sweetheart who couldn't say it out loud. Golly! That's how the world remembers Jim Nabors, America's innocent, goofy sweetheart from Gomer Pyle. He sang like an angel, made people laugh without trying, and lived a life designed to make others smile. But he spent decades hiding the one thing that made him smile: love. Jim was in a relationship with Stan Cadwallader for nearly 40 years. They traveled the world, built a life together, but they were never seen holding hands. Never embraced in public, never acknowledged by the industry that loved his voice but feared his truth. He didn't come out until 2013, retired, safe, and far from the stage that once adored him. "I'm 82, he said. It's about time." Jim Nabors gave joy to millions, while privately rationing it for himself. He deserved a love story, not a lifelong secret. He made the world laugh, but his own happiness was a whisper. Subscribe if you believe that joy should never come with a price tag. 11. Gene Kelly, the golden boy who danced around the truth. He tap danced on rain-soaked sidewalks and into our hearts. Gene Kelly was the epitome of American masculinity, muscles, charm, and movement so fluid it looked like magic. But while the world saw confidence, those closest to him saw walls. Gene was married more than once, but rumors swirled. Quiet whispers about close friendships with men, private parties, guarded glances. He never addressed them. He didn't have to. The myth of the straight, strong leading man was too profitable to question. Those who worked with him spoke of control, of perfectionism, of a man who kept his emotions tightly choreographed. His life was a masterpiece, but never fully his. Maybe he wasn't gay. Maybe he was more than a label. But what's certain is this: Gene Kelly built a life that looked like freedom, while quietly tiptoeing around it. He danced like no one was watching, but always lived like someone was. Subscribe if you believe legends deserved to move without fear. 12. Sir Michael Redgrave, the family man with a divided heart. He was knighted, revered, the head of a British acting dynasty. Sir Michael Redgrave commanded stages and screens alike. But behind the Shakespearean gravitas was a man who carried a secret heavier than any soliloquy. He loved men, deeply, passionately, but he also loved order, image, legacy. He married actress Rachel Kempson and fathered 3 children, Vanessa, Corin, and Lynn, who became stars themselves. Yet his truest self lived in shadows, anonymous letters, hidden affairs, unspoken regrets. His daughter Vanessa once called his silence a wall of shame he never tore down. Michael wasn't cowardly. He was terrified of losing it all. So he made the ultimate sacrifice. He gave the world a perfect family picture and erased himself from it. He gave us performances layered with truth, but never gave himself the same grace. Subscribe if you believe love shouldn't have to choose between legacy and honesty. 13. Howard E. Rollins Jr., the actor who hid behind authority. He had the kind of presence that made silence feel electric. In A Soldier's Story and In the Heat of the Night, Howard E. Rollins Jr. delivered roles that spoke to power, pride, and pain. But when the cameras cut, the man who played detectives and soldiers was quietly fighting his own war. He never came out, but whispers followed him from stage to screen. Friends knew. So did the press. But in a Hollywood where being black and brilliant was already a risk, being gay could end everything. So Howard hid. He battled addiction, ran from rumors, chased roles and respect in a system that asked him to sacrifice his soul. And in 1996, at just 46, he was gone. Taken by lymphoma, his truth still locked away. He was complex, uncompromising, and fragile in ways no script could capture. He played men who demanded justice, but never got to demand his own. Subscribe if you believe survival shouldn't mean silence. 14. Ben Piazza, the quiet talent. Hollywood forgot. You may not know his name, but you've seen his face. In The Bad News Bears, The Blues Brothers, and 100 other roles, Ben Piazza was always there, reliable, sharp, understated. But while Hollywood kept casting him, it never truly saw him. Ben was gay. He had a long-term partner, Wayne Tripp. They lived, loved, and weathered the storm of the AIDS crisis together, mostly in silence, because Ben never came out publicly, not even as friends died around him, not even when his own health began to fade. He wasn't a headline. He wasn't a scandal. He was a man doing his job while holding the most sacred parts of himself away from the world. When he died in 1991 from complications related to AIDS, Hollywood barely noticed. But the people who loved him, they remembered everything. He didn't need to be a star to matter. He just needed to be free. Subscribe if you believe quiet lives still deserve loud remembrance. 15. Dak Rambo, the cowboy who came out too late. He had a name fit for legend and a face to match. Dak Rambo looked like a man carved for the West, rugged, handsome, all-American. In shows like Dallas and Another World, he played the romantic lead women chased. But off-screen, he was running too, running from a truth he couldn't say aloud. For years, Dak lived in fear of being found out, of being fired, of losing the image the industry had sculpted for him. But when he was diagnosed with HIV in 1991, the silence cracked. He came out, publicly, bravely, painfully, not for drama, for truth. And for the first time, he wasn't acting. He became an advocate for AIDS awareness, spoke in churches, taught others about dignity. He died 3 years later, but in those final seasons of his life, he finally lived without pretending. He gave Hollywood his best performance, and gave the world his truth when it mattered most. Subscribe if you believe courage shouldn't come with a countdown. 16. John Dahl, the talent who vanished quietly. In Rope and Gun Crazy, John Dahl played men with secrets, restless, intense, unpredictable. But his most guarded secret wasn't in a script. It was in his smile, in the absence of a +1, in a career that never rose as high as it should have. He was gay. It was known, but never spoken, a truth kept just below the surface of his polite interviews and solitary red carpets. John had lovers. He had talent. What he didn't have was permission. Some say his sexuality cost him bigger roles. Others say he stepped back voluntarily, unwilling to play the game. What's clear is this: he died at 50 of a heart attack, alone, and Hollywood barely blinked. There was no scandal, no memoir, just a quiet fade out. He could have been a legend. Instead, he became a footnote. Subscribe if you believe no life should end as a whisper. 17. Paul Lynde, the clown who couldn't come out. He made America laugh. The voice, the sarcasm, that perfectly timed eye roll. Paul Lynde was a comedy legend, campy, cutting, unforgettable. But behind the laughter was a man whose smile often hid a scream. He was never out, not officially, but his sexuality was an open secret. Executives joked, tabloids poked, audiences laughed along. Yet Paul himself never said the words. He couldn't. He drank. He raged. He made rooms roar, then sat alone when the lights went out. The industry loved his wit, but feared his truth. Romantic leads? Never offered. Serious roles? Off the table. He was trapped in the joke until it stopped being funny. When Paul died alone in 1982, he left behind a trail of punchlines and pain. He never got to live as the full, fierce man he was, just the version the world could handle. He played the clown, but the price was his peace. Subscribe if you believe being funny shouldn't mean being fake. 18. Sal Mineo, the star who died just before he could shine again. He was Hollywood's first tragic teen. In Rebel Without a Cause, Sal Mineo didn't just play loneliness, he embodied it. A lost boy in a cruel world, desperate to be seen. Off-screen, it wasn't much different. Sal was gay, and in the 1950s, that meant danger. His fame skyrocketed in his youth, but the moment rumors began to swirl about his sexuality, the roles stopped. Big studios stepped back, scripts dried up. He was too talented to be ignored, too controversial to be embraced. But Sal never stopped fighting. He turned to theater. He directed. He pushed through the silence, preparing for a comeback in the late 70s. A new chapter, a second chance. Then, one night in 1976, he was stabbed to death outside his apartment. Just as he was reclaiming his light, it was taken. He never got to grow old, never got to come out on his own terms. Subscribe if you believe every story deserves a second act. If the Golden Age taught us anything, it's that talent can light a screen while truth flickers in the dark. May we remember these artists as whole, brilliant, complicated, human. If a story moved you, tell us why in the comments. If we missed someone, add their name and sources so we can honor them next time. Tap subscribe and the bell to help preserve LGBTQ+ film history without the shame, the spin, or the silence. Share this with someone who loves classic cinema and believes legends deserve to be seen in full color.